Today's daf we're going to be learning is Menachot daf Kuf Daled. It's the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started with the question, "My Have'ala." So we saw at the end of yesterday's daf, there was the opinion of Rebbe or there was a case in the house of Rebbe where the animal died, and the rabbis assessed the blood at a revi'it, and meaning the blood of a nevela was matame, was impure. But then we quoted a different sugya from Eduyot where it said that Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Shua ben Betera said that dam nevelot is tahor. So how do we resolve this contradiction? And my have'ala, what's the story? Is it or is it not? So Amar Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Moriana de Ben Nesiahavi. What they're really trying to understand is what happened in the house of Rebbe. So they say that Rabbi Yehuda was the teacher. He was the rabbi who paskined everything for the house of Rebbe. And he ruled exactly as he rules, which is Ditnan, Rabbi Yehuda Omil, Shishad Varim, and now we're going to see the source of the debate here. Shishad Varim mikule Beit Shammai michumrei Beit Hillel. So Rabbi Yehuda says there's 6 cases where Beit Shammai is lenient and Beit Hillel is more stringent. Okay, usually Beit Shammai is the more stringent one, but there happen to be 3 cases, and one of them, according to him, now there were different traditions about this, he thought that this was a dam nevelo, Beit Shammai mitaharim u Beit Hillel mitam'im. The Beit Shammai was lenient, but Beit Hillel was stringent, and we always hold like Beit Hillel. And therefore, he came to the conclusion that dam nevela is mitame, like Beit Hillel. Now, the others thought that no, it's flipped. Beit Shammai was the one who was strict, and Beit Hillel were the ones who were lenient, and we hold like Beit Hillel, and therefore are lenient. And why specifically a revi'it, a quarter of a log? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Av keshetim u Beit Hillel, even when Beit Hillel did say it's impure, lo timu ela b'revi'it. The shear they came up with was a revi'it. Why? Ho'il v'yachol likosh v'la'abod al kazayit. And this is why often a revi'it is the parallel to, it's the same as kazayit when it comes, kazayit is to food as revi'it is to liquids. And that's because if you put the kazayit and you take the blood and you have it congeal, then the amount of a quarter log equals a kazayit, an olive bulk. And that's why the shear was an olive bulk. And with that, we finish that Mishnah, moving to the next Mishnah. Ein mitnadvim log shnayim v'chamisha, aval mitnadvim shlosha v'arba'a v'shisha, u'mishisha u'lamala. So let's understand. If I'm going to offer wine libations in the temple, which I can do, voluntary wine libations, well, I can not do it in measurements of 1 log, 2 log, or 5 log. But I can do 3, 4, or 6. Why is this? Because 3, 4, and 6 are the magic numbers when it comes to log in the temple, right? When it comes to wine in the temple. Wine libations that go with sacrifices, right? Just like the oil also, it's the same measurements. A quarter of a hin, if you remember, is 12 log. Quarter hin for the keves, for the sheep. A third of a hin, which is 3. A third of a hin, which is 4 log, 2 for the ayil, for the ram, and a half a hin, which is 6 log, for the bull. So there you have 3, 4, and 6. Those are the magic numbers, so to speak. So just like in a libations that go along with the sacrifices, it's 3, 4, and 6. For the wine, if I decide I'm volunteering wine, it can only come in the 3, 4, and 6 measurements. Or and from 6 and up, you can also do it. Now, 6 and up first of all, you can do it in multiples of those numbers. But we're going to see not only that, but I could bring 7 because 7 is 3 and 4, right? 3 goes and 4 goes, so 3 plus 4 could work. Okay, and as you go up, you could basically do that with most of the numbers. Although we will see there's a little bit of a question there, but right now we're going to assume from over 6, it can be any sort of combination. The problematic numbers are 1, 2, and 5. Ibayelahu. Now they ask a question. We're going to try to bring a bunch of sources to try to get to an answer. Yesh kevel l'nesachim or ein kevel l'nesachim? So Rashi is going to explain what this question means. So we'll read in Rashi because it's a little hard to understand by the words alone. Is there keva in nesachim? What does this mean? Amar harei alai kach v'kach lugin. I mean Rashi, the first Rashi in the Gemara here. If I say I'm taking upon myself a certain amount of log, mi have keva de ein yachol lakrivan ela kol biyachad. Does that mean they are set like that? Meaning, I have to pour them all at once. Or dehu k'beu bekorban echad. Oh, ein keva. Or maybe we say ein keva v'yachol lakrivan madachazu ba'pei nafshayim. If I, let's say 7, okay? Or if I say 6 even. Let's take that. Okay, do I have to do all 6 at once? Or can I do 3 at once if I want, or 4 at once? Okay, now 4 at once is a little tricky because what are you going to do with the other 2? But let's say 3 at once. Okay, now the assumption is, right, it wasn't going with any particular animal, so we don't know. So can I divide it up or not? So now, that's what we think. But now the Gemara is going to say, well, really, what's the question? Because it's not really like that. Obviously, if I have 6, I could do 3 and 3, or I could do 6. It doesn't really matter because 3 is its own number. But hechidami, what exactly is the case? So here they define the question a little bit better. Kigon de'aite chamisha. What if I brought 5? Now 5 can't go as is. So now, okay, so what are the possibilities? Well, Iyar ein keval nisachim. If we say it doesn't really matter, you can divide them up as you want. Then mashachu makriv arba'a minayu dechazu la'ayil. Well, 4 is a good number because you can use it for a ram. So I take 4 of the 5 and I pour it on. Ve'ida chavi nedava, and the rest is left as a voluntary offering. Okay, what does that mean, nedava? Well, what it really means is I can't volunteer and bring 1 log, so it doesn't mean, right, 1 log of wine doesn't work. So what it means is I take the value of it and I give it to the temple, and it goes into, remember, we have all this motar, extra things left over, and I leave it for, right, usually we take the money, we sell it, we take the money, and we use it for sacrifices like ola, burnt offerings for the altar. Remember, they're called leketz mizbeach, just so that things are going on the altar when nothing else is happening. So if we say ein keva, then that's what we do. I don't have to bring them all, just because I said I'm bringing 5 log. I don't have to pour them all together. I can do 4 separately, and then leave the 1 as a motar, as extra. V'iyamar yesh keva l'nesachim, and if we say there is keva l'nesachim, adim imale lo carve. Now, if we say I have to do it all at once, well, I can't do it all at once because it's 5. So what do I have to do? I have to wait till I get another one, as I have to say, I'm voluntarily bringing a log, even though you can't really do that. But if you do it to say, I'm adding it to my other to get to 6, then you get to 6, and then you can pour it. Okay, those are the 2, that's the 2 possibilities. So now they say, so what's the halacha? Amar Abaye tashma. Abaye says, let's learn from here. Shisha lenidava. Now, I told you before about the motar, and we learned this before, and it's actually a Mishna in Masechet Shkalim that says there's 6 shofarot, which are like stucco boxes that are shaped kind of like a shofar triangle, a little bit like that, and they were used for nidava. The Iyar, okay, now there's shisha lenidava. We're going to see there's a whole list of what they're for. Now Iyar yesh keva lenisachim. I went back to the wrong place. Sorry. Shisha l'nidava, it's right here. I looked at the wrong line. I saw nidava earlier. Let's go back. Shisha l'nidava, v'amrinan keneged mi. And they say, what are the 6 for? So there were actually 13 shofarot. But 6 of them were for these voluntary ketz mizbeach offerings. What were they for? Well, one was keneged motar chatat, for leftover amounts. Let's say I said I'm bringing X amount of money to buy a chatat, and I bought the animal with less money. Had money left over. Motar ashamot, also for an asham. Motar asham nazir, for the asham of a nazir there was a special one. And motar asham mitzora, for the asham of a mitzora there was its own. Motar kinim, if there were leftovers from bird offerings. Umotar minchat chote, and the minchat chote, that's the korban olav yored, if you can't afford it and you bring a mincha. So these are 6 cases for the 6 shofarot. Now, in Ita, if we had motar of voluntary wine that would go for Ola, according to what we said, if there is keva if there isn't keva and you could do 4 and leave the 1 over and put it in the motar, well then, litaken shofar chuina kenega motar nesachim. There should be an extra one for any libation extras, and there isn't one. So they say, Hanach, what? No, we could say that's not a proof. Okay, again, we're trying to prove that in the end, you're going to say yesh keva, and you'd have to just wait to get the extra one because we don't put any in the motar. Otherwise, there would be a shofar for it, right? A pushka, so to speak, a stucco box. So they say no, there wouldn't be one. Why? Because these all have boxes in the temple. For what reason? Hanach lenidvat tzibur azli. They go for public offerings that we bring when there's nothing else going on the altar. And it seems like they're trying to say that wasn't really so common. So we put them in this box and it waits there until there's enough money, and until then we can go buy an offering with it. But Hanesh, right, also remember, these are all just some leftover money that you need to then go buy some public offering, communal offering, which is an animal. Costs money. But hane shchiche, these are very common. And therefore, in other words, libations went on all the time. Every korban was brought with libations. So if I have 5, I say I'm bringing 5, I bring 5, and now I'm left over with, I have 1 extra. Well, if shardim it's starfe demar udamar bahade adade v'karve, it's not just for communal offerings, for every offering. I could just go find someone who needs some more wine and just move it over to them. Okay, so it's very easy. So we don't need a shofar. The shofar is to leave it for when we'll eventually need it and be able to use it. This can be used all the time. I was thinking when you scalp tickets at a game, right? It's very easy. I mean, depending on what kind of game you're going to, but very easy. There's a big turnover, very quick turnover rate. So here also, it's very easy to just move it on to somebody else. So it could be that there isn't keva, and you can divide it, put 4, and use the other one. Just give it to somebody else. So that didn't prove anything. I'm a Rava, Tashma. Rava's going to have another attempt. Ezrach, right? First Abaye, now Rava. Ezrach. Okay, this is a pasuk by the libations in Bamidbar chapter 15, verse 13. Kol Ezrach yaseh kacha et ele. Okay, every Ezrach, every citizen, will do things like this. Okay, the same way we did it, right? The same way we described the 3, for the keves, etc. And then milamed shemitnadvim nisachim. So why does it say Ezrach? What is that extra word? Why does that have to tell you all Ezrachim do it like this? It teaches you the minadvim nisachim, that anyone, any Ezrach, any citizen can come along and say, I want to bring a libation. Vikama, how much do they bring? Shloshet lugim, 3 log. Uminayin, here's the key line, she'im ratzalo sif yosif. How do you know if they want to give more than 3 they can? Talmud lamal, yihiyeh. Okay, kol Ezrach yihiyeh, sorry, this is in v'niskehem chatziyahin yihiyeh laparush. The shitayin la'aya. Why does it say yihiyeh? Why didn't it just say chatziyahin lapal? Why does it say yihiyeh? Yihiyeh means even if you gave some extra. Okay, obviously that pasuk is talking about when there's an obligation, but we're moving it to talk about voluntary. Yachol yifchot, maybe you could give less. Now we already know from the Mishna you can't, because 1 and 2 you can't do. Talmud lamar kacha. No, it has to be like this. At least this, but yes, you could do more. So now they want to know, okay, we haven't really seen why this is proven one side or the other, but the Gemara asks, Ma yosif, what does it mean add more? If it means you could do more than 3, you could do 4 or 6, well, Mishna shlosha dechazu lekeves, it's not to say like, 3 you can do, and by the way, there's an extra pasuk to tell you can also do 4 and 6. No, you don't need an extra pasuk. Why can you do 3? Because the chazu lekeves, because that's what they brought when they brought sheep. So therefore, if you want to just bring a wine libation on your own, you can do it in the same amount that was brought for the sheep. Well, then well, then 4 and 6, well, you can use for the ram, you can use for the bull. So obviously, I don't need a pasuk to tell me if I want to voluntarily bring wine, I can bring it 3, 4, and 6. We know that. So I don't need it for that. So what does it mean if you want to be lahosif? Elalav, it must be lahosif what? Chamisha and shmamina and keval nisachim. Because if you can offer 5, what does it mean you can offer 5? It means that if I said I'm bringing 5, right now it doesn't really mean lechatchila, ideally I can bring 5. The Mishna already told us you can't. But what it means is if I said 5, it's fine. We can pour 4 and leave 1 over and give the extra to someone else. Okay, so what do you see here? Ein keva, I can divide up the amount that I promised. Shema mina. So that's a pretty good proof. However, Rav Ashi seems to disagree. Rav Ashi, although we're going to reject, or at least suggest it's not a clear-cut rejection of Rava, but it will leave things a little bit open. Rav Ashi, v'hanan lo tznan hachi. But we don't learn that. Why? Because our Mishnah seems to prove otherwise. It says, ein mitnadvim log, shnayim v'chamisha. You can't do a log, you can't do shnayim, you can't do chamisha. I didn't read that so well. Ein mitnadvim log, shnayim v'chamisha. Right? Neither of the 3. Now, what do you see here? Katani chamisha dumia d'shnayim. Now, 5 is right next to 2. We're going to learn that what's true for 2 is going to be true for 5, comes Rav Ashi, and he says, ma shnayim de lo chazu klal. Now, 2 can never be brought, because 2 is not enough. You can always do more, according to what we were saying. You can do 5 and pour 4 and leave the 1, but you can't do 2 at all, because 2 is just not enough. So if you say I'm voluntarily bringing 2 log, that's just meaningless. So now, if chamisha is right next to 2, juxtaposed in here, we must mean it's the same for both. So mashnayim de lo chazu klal, so since 2 can't be used at all, af chamisha nami de lo chazu klal, must be that 5 can't be done at all either, which means you can't assume what we just assumed, which is lahosif is 5, which gave us our answer, ein keva. No, maybe it's not 5. Maybe it is 4 or 6 or something more than that. She doesn't really explain. To which the Gemara rejects this proof for a different reason, which is midiria, hakadita v'hakadita. What do you mean? Just because 2 is next to 5 or 5 is next to 2 in that source doesn't mean, in the Mishnah, doesn't mean that they're identical. It could be 2 doesn't work and never will work. 5 works as long as you pour 4 of them. You just can't pour 5, but 5 would work if you poured 4 and then turn the other one into, someone else, give it to someone else, or change it, redeem it and put it into a korban ola. So, with that, again, what do we have? Rava tried to prove that ein keva, you could pour 4 out of 5, but Rav Ashi tried to reject it. We rejected his rejection, but it could be he's right. Okay, we're just suggesting maybe 2 is like 5 or 5 is like 2. Maybe it's not. We don't really know. So therefore, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, look, the question's still open. He says the following: Imtim tzalomar ein keva l'nisachim, ha'ein keva l'nisachim. Okay, it doesn't say very much. This just says, I'm not asking my question about that opinion. If you're going to say ein keva, meaning you could pour part of it and leave the rest, right, and do something else with it. So, fine. That's the way it is. I can't really ask a question about that. But imtim tzalomar, yesh keva l'nisachim. But what if you say there is keva? And you have to pour it all at once. And that means that if you're at 5, you have to wait till you get 6. So now he says, ad asara pshitale. So if you say you have to pour them all at once, I get it. Until 10, we're good. Right? 1, 2, and 5 don't work. Okay, now 1, 2 don't work at all. 5, or the truth is, theoretically, it could mean you could wait till you get enough and then do it. But, and then after 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, again, we said before, 7 is 3 and 4, right? So you could do it like that. 8 is 4 and 4. 9 is 3, right? 3, 3, and 3. Okay, or 6 and 3. Okay, so you can do all that. 10 you can do because it's 6 and 4. But achadasar mibaya. Okay, what's the problem with 11? Well, mibayali, or turning now to amubet, my gavra l'shnei parim kamachaven va'ad mibale lehu lo karve. When you say 11, did the person mean 11, which is really 6 and 6, just for some reason said 11 and not 12, and until they get to 12, it's not going to work. Or maybe they meant 2 elim and 1 keves, 4 plus 3, and maybe it's complete. So if you say yesh keva and you need it complete, if the person said 11, we don't know what they meant. Did they mean they were really aiming toward 12 but just didn't say it all and we just wait till they get one more? Or is that a complete number in and of itself and we can do it as is? So, and do we say, right, so they say it here, or maybe those, Trei mechad mina, v'chad mechad mina amrinan olo. Now, what's the real question they're saying? Could we have 2 from one type and 1 from another type? Okay, and as before we had either 3, 3, and 3, we had 3 and 6, we had 2 and 4 and 4, 3 and 4, those 2 different types, but 1 of each type. But when we see the number 11, can we say could be potentially made up of 2 of one and 1 of the other? Could we do that? Or do we say no? It has to be really all from one type, or 1 from one type, 1 from one type, 1 from one type, something like that, right? But not a combination of 2 from one type and 1 from the other. We don't know, and the answer is teku. Okay, we're left without an answer, don't have an answer. So in the end, it's not clear whether there is keva or there isn't keva. Okay, the best proof we had that even though Rav Ashi somewhat rejected it, we rejected his rejection, or at least said it's not a complete rejection. In the end, Rava seemed to say, Lahosif, you could add, you could theoretically do 5, even though, again, ideally you shouldn't do 5, but if you did it, it's effective because it's already 3 and 4 are included in 5, whereas 2, right, isn't anything. But you have to wait till you, right, according to this, it sounds like you actually don't have to wait. You can actually do the 5 as is. Just do 4 and leave the other one extra. That's what he seemed to think. Rava said it shows ein keva, but it's not clear. Okay, new Mishna. Mitnadvim yayin, as we saw, you can voluntarily offer wine, but ein mitnadvim shemen. But you can't bring an oil on its own. Now, this makes sense, sort of, because this is Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Because, okay, we're going to see inside, but you don't really voluntarily offer oil in the temple. There is no voluntary libation, right? There's no libation of oil alone. What's the libation? The libation is the oil goes with the mincha and gets offered. There's no pouring of oil generally on its own. The only time you see oil on its own really is the leper ceremony, but that's not even a libation. Okay, so right, that goes on the finger, and it gets sprinkled toward the parochet, and it goes on the ear and the finger and the toe of the leper, and then on the head of the leper, but it doesn't get poured like the wine does. So, Ein Nadvim Shemen Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, we've seen this machloket before. We saw it in Zvachim. Rabbi Tarfon Omer Nadvim Shemen. Rabbi Tarfon thinks you can. Amar Rabbi Tarfon. Why does he say? What's his proof? Mamatzinu b'yayin shuba b'chochva uba nedava. Okay, wine can be an obligation, and it can be voluntary. Af shemen shu b'chova. So now, therefore, since wine comes as an obligation and also could be brought as a voluntary offering, so shemen also, that comes chova as part of the mincha offering, ba nedava, it also could be a nedava, voluntary offering. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, lo, im amarta b'yayin sheken karev chovato b'fnei atzmo. He says, no, the wine comes on its own when it goes with the libations, right? You just pour wine down. Tomar b'shemen, but you can't say the same thing b'shemen. She'eino karevim chovato b'fnei atzmo. It doesn't get offered by on its own. Okay, so there's your machloket. Now a different issue. Ein shnayim mitnadvim isaron echad, aval mitnadvim ola u'shlamim va'of afilu preda echad. Two people can't voluntarily bring a mincha. We're going to have to see why this is. Even though two people can offer a korban ola together, two people can offer a korban shlamim together, which are both animal offerings. They can also offer an oaf, even a little small teeny bird. Okay, what do they mean by even that? Either they're saying even because it's so small, or even because usually often birds come in pairs. We'll get to all of that in Masechet Kinim, but usually they come in pairs, and therefore what they're saying is even if you only offer one, two people can offer one together. Okay, so it could be the size issue, it could be that it's not in a pair. So I'm a Rava. Now, going back to the machloket about whether you can voluntarily say, I'm going to bring oil to the temple. I'm a Rava, midivrei shnehem nilmod, mitnadev adam minchat nesachim bechol yom. So from what both of them say, it seems that you could, right, that the machloket between them is bringing wine without anything. Oil without anything. But if you were to bring and say, I'm going to bring a mincha, a libation mincha, which basically means, Rashi tells us in case you weren't sure, solet, shemen, and yayim without a korban. You're basically bringing a mincha and the wine without any sacrifice. Usually the mincha nesachim goes with a korban. So the Gemara says, pshita, okay, what's the chidush here? Of course you can voluntarily bring a mincha. No, ma'u detema, it's not so clear, because you might have thought, let's go back to what we learned about Menachot. Remember, there's 5 voluntary Menachot, right? In chapter 2 of Vayikra, what does it say? If you want to bring a mincha, what do you bring? Right? There's minchat solet, which is the raw dough, and then you take a kometz out of the dough and you burn it. And then there's 4 baked or fried first, before you take the kmitza. If you remember, first you bake or fry them, then you break it into pieces, then you take a kometz out and you burn that, and you're left with the rest, right? Remember, the kohanim get the rest. And that's the machvat or marcheshet, which is the flat pan or the deep pan, fried. And then you have the 2 baked offerings, which are the rikikim and the chalot. Remember, the chalot have the oil mixed in, and the rikikim don't have the oil mixed in. They're actually fried in oil. No, they're fried in oil, and then they are, wow, I just got confused for a minute. No, they're not fried. My mistake. They're baked, and then you put oil on after. Okay? Why am I confused by them right now? Yeah, that's what you do. Okay, so now we're going to have the question about, we're going to say like this. Why would you have thought that maybe that's not the case? Ma'u detema minchat nedava gali berachmana hani chabisha menachot in tfeilo. Maybe you would have thought those are the only 5 you could bring as voluntary. You can't say I'm bringing a minchat nesachim as a voluntary offering. Kamash malam, but it comes to tell you hani mila bistama. Those 5 you bring, if you didn't say what kind of mincha you're bringing, those are the 5 standard ones. Okay, So if you just said b'stama, then you bring one of the 5. Now you could also say I'm bringing a marcheshet, I'm bringing a machvat. But if you just said harei alai mincha, it's one of those 5. But hera de parish. But if I say specifically I'm bringing a mincha nesachim, then I can bring it. Okay, not a problem. Now we go to the ein shnayim nedvim. Why can't 2 people bring a mincha offering? We're going to try to figure out what the source for this is. My time. Ilema, if you're going to say mishum dichtiv takriv. Okay, nefesh ki takriv korban mincha laHashem. That's in Vayikra bet there. If a nefesh, a person is going to be takriv is singular. So maybe because of that. That's not a good proof. Because ola nami, now we already learned korban ola, 2 people could share. And haktiv yakriv. It also says, okay, im ola korbano min abakal, zachar tamim yakrivenu, and then it says later in the pasuk, yakriv oto, singular. Ela ola my time. I know maybe ola is an exception to the rule, but this also isn't going to work. Because dichtiv, it says in pasuk, in Bamidbar chapter 29, verse 39, it says, this is what you should bring to God on the holidays. In addition to levad, in addition to minidrechem and itvotechem laolotechem. Okay, so there, what does it say? To your burnt offerings with a plural tense. So maybe that's why ola can be brought by joint offer, right? By many people. Your olot in plural form. But minkanami haktiv, okay, the word right after leolotechem in the pasuk is right, lenidrechem v'nidvotechem leolotechem uleminchotechem. Also menachot come in plural there, which means again your. Remember, the plural is really the end of the minchotechem, yours. So yours would be plural. That can't be it. Ela mishum dichtiv ba nefesh. The answer is because it starts the first pasuk we saw before. Nefesh ki takriv. Nefesh is an individual. Only individual, not joint ownership. Tanya namihachi, here's a braita to support it. Rabbi Omer she'akriv korbanot l'chol nidreihem l'chol nidvotam asher akrivu laHashem. This is a different pasuk in Vayikra kaf bet. Hakol ba'im b'shutafut, okay, because it says asher yakrivu laHashem in plural form. They will sacrifice. Everything can be brought as a joint sacrifice. But lo sileka katuv ela mincha. Okay, that pasuk says l'chol nidreihem, l'chol nidvotam asher yakrivu laHashem la'olah. Talks about neder, nidava, voluntary. It talks about ola, but what doesn't it talk about? Mincha. Why? Shene'amal nefesh. Now, what do you see here? It's not because it's missing from that pasuk, but what they're saying is shutafut applies across the board in all korbanot, except for mincha because of the word nefesh. So there's your braita to support what the Gemara said. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Here's a different drasha on why mincha says nefesh. Mipnei manish tanet mincha shene'amal ba nefesh. Why was it different than the korbanot, where there it says nefesh and it doesn't say it elsewhere? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu mi darko lahavi mincha ani. Who brings a mincha? There's a really nice way to end the chapter. Who generally brings a mincha? Someone who can't afford it. A poor person, right? Because they can't afford to bring a voluntary offering of an animal. It's too expensive. Ma'ale ani alav. So God says to this poor person who made the effort, even though they don't have a lot of money, they made the effort to bring a voluntary offering to God. Ma'ale ani alav. I make it as if if he sacrificed his soul to me. Okay, that's why it says nefesh, because nefesh translates as a person, but it also translates as a soul. Okay, a very beautiful idea. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, manish tanet mincha shene'amar b'chamisha minei tigun halalu. Rabbi Yitzchak's now going to say another statement of the same type, but from a different angle. Why is mincha different? That you could do it and fry it in 5 different ways. Okay, there's all different ways to make a mincha offering, whereas an animal is just sacrificed in the same way, always. Mashal lemelech basar v'dam she'asalo ohavo seuda. So it's like a king, where the person who loves the king made him a nice meal. But yodea bo shuani. But he knows, and someone invites the king to their house. Now the king knows this person doesn't have the ability to make a feast fit for a king. So amar lo aseh li min chamisha minei tigun kadesh e'eneh mimcha. He says, listen, take the food you have, which is very basic, and it's probably not much more than flour and water and all that. But you know what? Do it, fry it in all different ways, and that way you can make it look like you're serving me a full meal full of lots of different variety of things, when in the end you're using the same raw ingredients to just get to something, right, something else. It's going to look different, it's going to look like a nice meal, even though it doesn't really have, right, the expensive things that I'm normally used to eating. So it's a nice idea of, God, number one, right, making it as if that is the best sacrifice ever, and also saying, I understand you want to make it nice, I'll give you some ideas of how you can do it better, right, when your resources are limited. And with that beautiful idea, we didn't yet finish our daf, but we did finish the chapter. Okay, starting chapter 13. Hare alai isaron yavi echad. Okay, this could connect a lot with the Mishna on the previous page about that you can do up to, right, a 60 isaron can go into one vessel. Okay, and 60 was kind of like the maximum of something that could go in a vessel. So hare alai isaron yavi echad. If I say, I'm taking, okay, we're going to get back to the 60 in a minute. I just wanted to preface it to prepare you, but we're not yet there. If I say, this chapter is all about vows, and they're going to start with vows of Menachot. Okay, if I say, I take upon myself to bring an isaron. So you have yechad. Okay, that's very obvious. The Gemara is going to say, why are you telling us this is obvious? You're supposed to bring one isaron. You said isaron. Singular, it means one. Esronot, if I said plural esronot I'm going to bring, you have yishnayim. You bring two, because generally we say plural means two. However, if I say perashti ve'eni yodea ma perashti, listen, I said I was going to bring a mincha. I have no recollection at all about what I said. Yavi shishim isaron. You have to bring 60. Because we kind of look at that. That's probably the biggest that you would have offered. So you now have to bring 60 isaron. Remember, that's a huge, crazy amount. That's 120 kilos. Okay? So like in Israel, for example, a bag of flour is a kilo. It's 2.2 pounds in pounds. Okay? That kilo, right? Imagine 120 bags of those. That's huge. This Mishna in general is going to get very exaggerated. If you say, I took upon myself a mincha, but you didn't say which kind of voluntary mincha you're going to bring, the marcheshet, the machvat, all that, so you can just bring anyone you want. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, you bring the one that doesn't even get baked before. That's just, the comments is taken as its raw dough, because that's the special one. Why it's special, I don't know, especially since nothing really was done with it other than mixing it. But they call it the special one. The Gemara is going to give us an answer for why it's special. At the stage of the Mishna, we don't really understand yet. Mincha or minha mincha. Okay, let's say it better. Mincha, I said I'm bringing a mincha. Or I say, or minha mincha, a type of mincha. Yavi echad. I only have to bring one type of mincha, okay? So we don't know which mincha I said, but I said mincha, I'm bringing a mincha, so any kind of mincha. If I said I'm bringing a type of mincha, any type of mincha. But if I say menachot or menachot, if I said that in plural, you have ishtayim. Okay, now we're talking not about, right, we're talking about not how much, but how I prepare it. So anyway, I bring two, okay? In this case, menachot, it sounds like two different types probably. Okay, you have to bring two different types. Let's say choose a machvan and a marcheshet, or rikikim and kalot, or any two. Perashti ve'eni yodea eze mehem. But if I said, listen, I specify what kind of mincha I was bringing, but I don't remember which one, then obviously what are you going to have to do? Yavi chamishtan. You're going to have to bring all 5 types. Perat, right? This is all mishum safek. We don't know what you really meant, and now you have to keep what you said. Perashti mincha shel esronim ve'eni yodea kama perashti. I said I was going to bring a mincha made of esronim, but I'm not sure how many. Now, how this is different from the first, where you said I'm bringing esronot, it's not so clear. Okay, the Gemara is going to get into that. Okay, we'll get to this even today, even though there's not a lot of Gemara, but we will get there. The mincha of esronim, and I just don't know how many, yavi shishim isaron. In this case, you have to bring 60, because you said I'm bringing a mincha of esronim, and you don't know how many. Okay, also in the first part, we said you have to bring 60. But here we have a machloket. Rabbi Omer, yavi menachot shel esronot me'echa v'ad shishim. You have to bring minchas of esronot from 1 to 60. That means you have to bring 60 different menachot. The first one has 1 isaron, the second one has 2, the third one has 3, the fourth one has 4, and then up to 60. That's a crazy. I told you the Mishna is going to get exaggerated. This is really ad absurdum, really ad absurdum. And that's I didn't check how much that is, okay, but you could probably put in AI and ask it to do 1 plus 2, right, plus 3 until you get 60 and get to a number. In any case, that's a lot of esronim. So we don't really understand Rebbe and Tanakama. We don't really understand how this different from the earlier case, so we'll get there in the Gemara. There's going to be 2 explanations. The Gemara starts off with the question, Pshita, isn't it obvious, as we said before, Harei Elai Sarah, on the first line of the Mishnah, Yavi Echad. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Esronot Yavi Shtayim Yitzri Chalei. Well, the reason why they talk about the first case was to foil it with the second. If you said Isaram, then you bring 1. If you said Esronot, then you bring 2. To which the Gemara says, Hanavi Pshita, isn't that obvious also? To which they answer, mi'ut esronot shtayim itzrich aleh. What they needed it for was to say the mi'ut esronot shtayim, which is when you use something in plural, we generally, if you said harei elai esronot, you must have meant two. However, the next case, perashti ve'eni yodea ma perashti yavi shishim isaron, right? That was the case we saw where we said, if you said, I'm going to bring a certain amount, but you don't remember what you said, then you have to bring 60. So Mantana, who does this go according to? We're going to have Machloka Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, how this fits in with the later part of the Mishnah that we discussed at the time. It's a little bit confusing where Rebbe disagrees, because it's a very similar case. The latter case is Perashti Mincha Shel Esronim. I said I was going to bring a Mincha of Esronim. So are these the same case, different case? It's a little bit confusing. So Chizkiah says, Amar Chizkiah to lo Rebbe, De'i Rebbe Hamar Yavi Menachot Shel Esronim Me'achav Ad Shishim. This obviously isn't Rebbe, because this one says bring 60, and Rebbe in the end of the Mishnah said, if you said I said I was going to bring a mincha of esronim, and I don't know how many, said you have to bring 60, right? I'm sorry, he said you have to bring 1 to 60. You have to bring 60 vessels with 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The fourth one has to have 4 esronim, and so on until you get to the one with 60 esronim. So he obviously wouldn't agree in the Reisha that if you say, I don't know what, I'm only bringing 60, he would obviously insist that you would bring, a whole, it seems, it's a little confusing because what they're kind of saying is these are really one and the same case. And he would disagree. And it's a big question, according to Chizkiah, really unclear then what's the difference between the cases. Okay? But the second interpretation, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Afilu Tema Rebbe, you could explain it as Rebbe. Be'omel would be a case where you said perashti esronot aval lo keva'atam bekli. What's the difference? In the first case, Rabbi Yochanan says, I said I'm going to bring an amount, but I didn't say they all have to be in one vessel. And then, the mincha shel esronim at the end of the Mishnah, you said you want to bring a mincha, meaning in one vessel. And then the machlok is going to be like this. If you said it's going to all be in one vessel, then basically Rebbe's going to say, then you have to bring, okay, so let's just go to Tanakama there, and now we're going to understand Tanakama better also. Tanakama there says, bring 60 esronim in one bowl. Now Rebbe, Tanakama has no problem with you basically saying, and Rashi explains this here based on, it's actually a machlokah that comes up later, but on Daf Kuf Vav, but basically that you can split it and say, say like this, if it's, you make a tanai, a stipulation, if it's my chovah, right, whatever's supposed to go for my chovah goes to my chovah, my obligation, everything else is voluntary. And therefore, he has no problem, put it all in one bowl, both in the Reisha and in the Seifa. Goes in one bowl of 60, right, you put all the 60 in one bowl, it's no problem. Whether you said it all has to be in one vessel, it doesn't have to all be in one vessel, it doesn't matter. You can put them all in one vessel. But the second case, okay, now we're going to see in a minute, okay, let's talk about that first case. It doesn't need to be in a vessel altogether. So let's go to Rebbe. In the first case, and that's the next words in the Gemara, Demaiti shitin esronot b'shitin mani. Now we thought the Reisha was talking about, if I said, I don't know how many, I bring 60 seron, and we assumed it was in one vessel. Now we're going to say, no. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that's Rebbe. What does Rebbe say? You can't bring them all in one vessel. Why not? Because you're not allowed to bring them all in one vessel if you didn't promise 60. If you promised 20, then only 20 can go in the vessel, right? So what's he going to say? You bring 60 esronim in 60 vessels, meaning 60 vessels, 1 isaron per vessel. And then, basically, if you do 1 isaron per vessel, you didn't say they all have to be in one bowl, so we don't care if you brought them in 50 bowls, and let's say it was 50 esronim. So the 50 that it was, you fulfilled your obligation. The other 10 were individual, and we have no problem because you didn't mix them in the same bowl. So then Rebbe agrees you can split it. And he explains the Reisha, according to Rebbe, in that way. And the Seifa, now he doesn't say this, but what's obvious is he means in the Seifa, what's the issue? You said they were all to be in one bowl. That's why, if you said 50 and they're all in one bowl, well, you have to have 50 in one bowl in one of your bowls. So basically, you're going to have to go from 1 to 50 to 60 in all the bowls to cover all your options. Okay? So again, 2 debates about whether, right, 2 differences of opinion is the Reisha, the Tanakama's position, and it's really that you put them all in one bowl and you make this stipulation, and Rebbe wouldn't agree with that because he doesn't agree with these stipulations. And the Seifa has this machloket because he does say that if it was all in one bowl, then you can just do all the possible permutations, which again, then we said it's not so clear then if Rebbe disagrees with in the ratio, what the difference is between the two cases and why bother saying them as two cases. Or according to Rabbi Yochanan, you could actually explain the ratio differently than we thought. It's not all in one bowl. It's in separate bowls, but the ratio, it's one in every bowl, and in the Sefer it has to be whatever number in every bowl because you actually wanted it to be all in one bowl. And therefore you have to have all the different possibilities. Now we're going to finish up with Harei alai mincha yavi eza sheyirtzeh. She said, I'm going to bring a mincha. You can bring anyone you want. Rabbi Yehuda had said then, no, you have to bring the solet because that's the best. Why is that the best? Tana ho'ilu patach bo katuv tchila. So the Breita says, it's because it's the first example that they bring. So that makes it special. So Elameata, the Gemara says, that's a kind of hard, difficult suggestion because ha'omer harei alai olah, right? Elameata, that's a hard suggestion because ha'omer harei alai olah yavi ben bakar ho'ilu patach bo katuv tchila. You could say the same thing when it says harei alai olah. You should bring a ben bakar because that's the first one mentioned there. And the Gemara is going to go on with several questions like this and say, this doesn't really jive. So with that, we're going to end here, and we'll continue on with this question and try to figure out what is it with the solet that makes it special. So in the beginning, we had the first issue about what they did in Beit Rebbe with the dam nevela that was matame, and why was it impure? And we explained it based on the kula of Beit Shammai, this version that Rabbi Yehuda had about the machlokot between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and that's why there was this debate about the blood of the nevela. And we explained how we got to a revi'it. From there, we got to, if you want to voluntarily bring wine libations, what amounts can you bring in? And then we had a whole question, is there keva or not? Meaning, do you have to pour the whole thing all at once? Or can you split it and pour it in increments that could be poured and leave over the remainder, right, for something else? We didn't really end up with an answer for that. Then we moved to the shemen, the machloket, about whether you can voluntarily bring oil or not between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. And then the issue that a mincha can't be brought b'shutafut, and we ended with those nice ideas, concepts about a mincha being a poor person's offering and how much God appreciates that, and drashot from the pasuk. Then we finished up with someone who makes a vow that says, I'm going to bring something, but either doesn't remember what they said or said something that wasn't clear, and then we have to figure out what exactly do they need to bring in order to fulfill their obligation. And with that, we finish for today, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.